Okay.
It is Wednesday, October 18th. It is top of the middle of the day, 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and you're on Lunch Conversations with Randy and Teddy, and I applaud everyone who made a decision to either show up in the audience, show up and watch us on LinkedIn, show up and watch us on Facebook. For those of you who are going to wait and listen to the podcast or watch it on YouTube, I can promise you this will be fun, enlightening, enjoyable. We might even teach ourselves something. Hey, for those who have never met me, I'm Teddy. I'm a LinkedIn strategist, trainer, and coach, and my day job. I wear a cape for that. Randy knows about my cape. My purpose is to teach business professionals how to use LinkedIn as a business tool. I do one-on-one coaching, corporate training. I do seminars, webinars. I do keynote speeches. And those of you who know me, you've heard my spiel before. You know I'll stand on the street corner and proselytize about the power of using LinkedIn as a business tool. So thanks a lot for joining us today. Randy's going to have the conversation today with our special guest, Beth Dickey, and we'll tell you where she's at later on, because you're probably looking at this and wondering, oh my God, how they pull that off. Randy, do I have my ducks all marching down the street in nice straight order?
Yeah, I think so, except that Facebook decided to take a lunch break or a smoke break, and I'm not sure that we're able to share it.
Well, why don't you tell the world who you are, and I'll work on that.
That'll work fine. Hey, again, Randy Wooden with Goodwill Industries of Northwest North Carolina, based in Winston-Salem. Have clients all across the country. I run our professional center. So if you're on the call or watching it later, or maybe you know somebody else, if not you, that is in a job hunt. I've helped folks, again, all different industries, ages, functions, that kind of thing. So give me a call, email me, find me on LinkedIn. I'm out there, and we'll get you on the calendar, try to get some help. But as we do every Wednesday, Teddy and I get together. What is this show? What, 184, 5?
184, dude. Yeah.
184 shows. Every Wednesday, we get together for an hour and have a live conversation. And today, no exception. We're going to learn stuff. We have Beth Dickey. She is a program manager for NASA. Yeah, that NASA. And we'll learn a whole lot more.
That, Randy?
How about NASA? Does that sound familiar?
You get it right. And by the way, I fixed Facebook. I had to call Zuckerberg, but I fixed it.
Oh, did you? Okay, so I'll just hit share, and because I'm multitasking and multidimensional, I'll hit share and while I'm still talking. Anyway, we're going to learn about NASA's history, its present, its future, and we're going to learn some behind the scenes stuff about some cool astronauts, and also some of the everyday items that we use that have been developed as part of the research that NASA has done over the years. Things that help make our lives easier, we may take for granted, but if it weren't for NASA, we wouldn't have them. And so let's again, if you have comments, questions for Beth, put them in the chat area. Teddy will keep an eye on that. And Beth, how about you introduce yourself a little bit more detail, and then we'll get started.
Okay, well, as you said, I'm a program manager, one of probably countless program managers at NASA. I'm not a volt turner. I'm not an engineer. I don't even play rocket scientist on TV. My program management is in strategic communications and planning in the Office of Communications, and that's the office that makes sure that people like me can tell you stories about NASA in a way that you can understand them and enjoy them. I'm actually semi-retired. Okay. I left the agency in 2020. I escaped during the pandemic. After about 15 or 16 years in federal service, I started in the government at the Voice of America. I was an international broadcaster. I worked as an editor on the news desk, covering East Asia and the Pacific. Then after a year and a half or so out of government, I went back to NASA as a media relations specialist, a public affairs officer, and I'm telling you the job progression now. Worked as deputy chief of the NASA newsroom, which is the office that puts out all the news releases, and then moved on to become a program manager in strategic planning and integration. So I was out of government, retired for 6 or 7 months, and they decided that they needed to pick my brain. So they brought me back as what the government calls a re-employed annuitant in the middle of 2021. It's a temporary assignment. Depending on how the budget negotiations go, it could be up in November or December, or maybe last through the middle of next June. We'll just have to wait and see. And essentially what I do is consultation work. I work with NASA communicators on strategic planning and integration issues. It's really sort of, how do we wire things so that people talk to each other and they work more efficiently inside, so that we can help you be entertained and informed outside.
There you go. So I always ask Teddy, you didn't something?
No, I'm good. I like the way she presented that. I get that, because there's a lot of us that don't understand that stuff, shoot a rocket to another planet and hope you get there. And when you get there, hope you find what you're expecting or can manage what you find. So I'm with you.
Yeah. I always like to ask the why question. You're passionate about what you do. You've been doing it for a long time. And let's face it, NASA, it's a sexy topic. I mean, and one of our, Stephen on one of our attendees, I mean, when he was a kid, everybody wanted to be an astronaut. And all I ever did was just take up space. So that's about as far as I got, but I digress. What's your why, Beth?
Well, I guess it speaks to a little more of my history. Clearly I'm older than 15 or 16 years in professional world. My first chapter was in the America's Space Press Corps. I covered crewed and uncrewed missions launched from Kennedy Space Center in Cape Canaveral in the 1980s and the 90s. Worked for major news outlets, print and broadcast, consumer industry publications. I'll just tick off a few here: New York Times, Reuters, CBS News Radio, Air and Space, Smithsonian. There was a TV show on the USA channel called Inside Space that I did a few episodes of. Aviation Week. Newsweek, I think, was one of my most memorable assignments. You're looking at the person who broke the news that John Glenn was going to fly on the space shuttle. I'm going to tell you, I sweat bullets for weeks until the agency acknowledged that it was actually going to happen.
Yeah.
And then had some stints in Washington at Government Executive Magazine as part of my freelance life in the past. I was a Watergate baby. Everybody remembers, where they were when Kennedy was shot, or where this or that happened. I remember where I was when Richard Nixon resigned, and that's all important because I didn't really have any early interest in the space program. You talked about your vague recollections, Randy. Mine was in Girl Scout camp, Camp Sandy Bend. So outside of in Wood County, West Virginia. I was at Camp Sandy Bend when Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin landed on the moon. And they took us out in the yard of the camp superintendent's house. We were in sleeping bags, and they pulled a black and white TV out on the porch with the rabbit ears, and plugged it in, a little TV, and we were all trying to see it. But if you remember, we didn't understand much about the moon then.
So let me jump in here, Beth. So it was a case of saying, hey, listen, this was really cool. I'm a little kid. This is cool. No. And you just sort of one thing morphed to the other.
And it's kind of, it's a winding story. I ended up in journalism, ended up at a local newspaper in Florida, ended up without a job, went into radio news, ended up out of work again, and decided I'd be better off freelancing. Needed source material, needed to make a living. Space was the story in my backyard.
Got it.
That's how I did it. Fast forward 2006, I'm in Washington working for Government Executive. staff correspondent covering space transportation technology. Suddenly I managed to land an assignment with NASA, which was, another story in itself, but
Gotcha.
it had nothing to do with me caring about space. That came later.
It just came later. All right, so let's relive a little bit of the past here. You and I both went to Marietta College in Ohio, and another pioneer, Marietta College nickname or a mascot, whatever. Story Musgrave. Let's tell us a little story about Story.
He's a pioneer, definitely. Interestingly, he, aside from that TV out in the rain at Camp Sandy Bend, he was my first brush with the space program, and I didn't know it. And how that is that he went to school with my mom. And I didn't learn this until I'd been covering space for quite a few years. But he's quite the Renaissance man. He's the only NASA astronaut to have flown on all 5 of the space shuttles. Second one to fly on 6 space missions. I think he could be considered the most highly educated astronaut in history. Let me just run through his degrees here. And you can count this timeline essentially by how old you are. All right. BS in mathematics and statistics from Syracuse in 1958. MBA in operations analysis and computer programming at UCLA 1959. That's where he became interested in neurophysiology and decided he would go to medical school. But first he had to complete some undergraduate pre-med. So he was on his way back to Syracuse, crossed the Ohio River, saw Marietta, stopped at the college, asked about their pre-med programs, and decided to stay.
So let me summarize here, because we don't know where he went to school, and that what I want to get at is this guy's a bright guy, and he's one of the most traveled and diverse astronauts, and he went to a Division III small school. He's one of us.
Small school.
Now, is
BA
he still
in chemistry from Marietta.
Yeah, is he still living? I'm just curious. He's still alive?
Yeah,
Is he? Okay,
he is.
cool.
He's a public
Lives
speaker.
lives in Florida, last I knew. Sorry.
He's a public speaker, and he works for Disney's Imagineering group. Pretty freaking cool.
He has. I actually I tried to get in touch with him before we got this call together. Wasn't successful in doing that, but Disney Imagineering was one of the other things that he's done. He's done landscape architecture, had a palm tree farm, ran a production company in Sydney, Australia, a sculpture company in Burbank, California. It's crazy. And he didn't stop at Marietta. He got his doctorate in medicine.
But Beth, not to go too deep into the story, but the point here is you ran into him at some point or another, and you never know where all of these connections are going to cross. And by the way, he went to Marietta in 58, Randy. I think slightly before you were born.
My time. Hey, let's pivot here. NASA's a big entity, and if you're like a lot of guys, you just know, hey, years ago they went to the moon. They've done some space shuttles. They've had some, I guess, the space station. They get involved in a lot of stuff, but I mean, it was a long time ago they went to the moon. And so what are these guys up to today? What's NASA doing if they're not going to the moon or flying shuttles anymore? Well,
let me just say that if you have to ask me that question, you're not keeping up with the news. So, what do? We explore the solar system. This behind me, thanks to NASA, the United States has a permanent presence in space. I'm not in space. It's just a picture. Let's talk a little bit about just some things that have happened in the last few weeks. Okay. 2 asteroid missions. One came back to Earth, and just a week ago they unveiled the first samples of that and talked to the public about it. Last Friday they launched another mission to an asteroid. The end of September they had a guy come back from the space station with a duration record this coming week. I think one's scheduled for tomorrow and another one on October 30th, 2 spacewalks out of the space station. So NASA's very much in business. 2 rovers and a helicopter on Mars right now. A lot of climate change research going on. Aeronautics, which is the first A in NASA, is doing research on environmentally responsible aviation. And then, of course, we're working on Artemis, which is the plan to go back to the moon, this time to stay, and then use what we learned there to get ready for a mission to Mars.
Is Artemis the new Apollo or whatever? It was Mercury, then Apollo. I mean, is Artemis the latest iteration of space travel? Is that what it's called? The next chapter or whatever?
Yeah.
Artemis.
You want to talk about Artemis now? You don't want to talk about asteroids?
Yeah, we're going to talk asteroids, but when I hear Artemis, I think I never heard of it. I never heard of Artemis. I've heard of Mercury. I've heard of Apollo. I've heard that kind of stuff. So
right. Artemis. It's the new Apollo. They call it the next giant leap. We can talk in depth about that.
Yeah.
Whatever
the
you
next
want to talk
giant
about
leap.
next.
So asteroids. All I know about asteroids is I hope it doesn't hit my house because that would ruin my day. And
well,
I won't be able to.
So here's the great thing is part of the work they're doing is going to help them if it ever looks like one's going to hit your house. Okay.
Ooh.
So
hit Teddy's house. Have it hit Teddy's house and he'll come over here, but just don't let it land on mine.
Yeah, well, if it hit Teddy's house, you'd be gone too, probably.
Oh.
But here's because it would be an impact, right? If that happened.
Not a tiny one,
but,
it's a big one.
And no, would probably be a big one, right? Remember what they think killed the dinosaurs, right? Was an asteroid.
Yeah.
So this one that came back called OSIRIS-REx, it had gone a few years ago to an asteroid way out there. Oh my goodness, I don't know, 100 million miles, between 100 and 200 million miles away, and landed and scooped up some regolith. And that's a scientific word for pebbles and dirt. Scooped up in a canister, this sample of dirt, and lifted off and brought it back to Earth. Took 7 years to do this, but they landed it on a parachute in the desert a few weeks back. Took it to a lab at Johnson Space Center in Houston and started unpacking it. And what they found was that the pressure from that landing blew way more sample up into the canister than they ever expected to get. So last week, when they talked to the public about all of that, they hadn't even opened the initial sample yet. They're still collecting debris that didn't even get, that was outside. And they already, just from looking at that, discovered they know there's water and carbon in this asteroid. And that's important because those are the building blocks of life. So they can learn from this asteroid a little bit about where we came from, but also it will help them understand the chemical composition, the composition of the asteroid, which if they ever have to mount some sort of a mission to deflect an asteroid, will help them design the equipment to do that.
Wow. How big was this asteroid roughly? I mean, how many miles did they have an idea? I mean, it took 7-8 years to get there, and that's amazing. How large was that?
I'm not sure how big it was, but it was, not nearly the size of the moon or the Earth. It was, big enough to hurt us if it were to hit. And it actually is, the asteroid is called Bennu, and it's actually one of the most potentially hazardous ones that we know of. And there is a little bit of concern that it may come close to us late in the next century. We'll all be gone. We don't have to worry about it. But the people who come after us could have to worry about it. I'm not entirely sure how big.
It's 1/3 of a mile at the width of the equator. It's a tiny thing in the big picture based on Teddy's mind.
Where do they come from, though? I mean, are they break off from other planets, or how does that debris get up in there?
They're remnants of solar system formation. Essentially, some are carbonaceous. That's a big word, like Bennu. Others are made of metal. And one that's made of metal is 16 Psyche, and that is the asteroid that is the target of the mission that launched on Friday. It's also way out there. This spacecraft they sent will get there, I think, in 2029 timeframe.
Wow.
It's not going to bring back a sample, but it's going to orbit around and learn more about the mineral composition of that one.
What about any near misses? Christy asked about that. What's the closest we've ever come to Armageddon?
Well, that's not something I have in my data bank. Unfortunately, like I told you, I prepared a stack of notes this thick, but that was a fact that I didn't research. I will tell you that these kinds of things are really easy to find on Google.
Yeah.
Really easy to find. I wanted to tell you a story about this though, because, I said they took it back to Johnson Space Center and put it in a lab. I've been in those labs. And they built a new one for the asteroid sample, but I've had the privilege several times of being in the clean rooms where they keep the moon rocks. And it's quite an experience to be able to go in there, because you dress up in this, they call it a bunny suit, but it's a hat and a mask and white overalls, and you go through what's called an air shower. It's a enclosed chamber where they blow perfectly clean air on you to get all of the dust and the stray hairs, and you're not allowed to wear makeup in there, perfume, anything like that. And they clean you off, and then they let you go in the room, and all these samples are kept in these things called glove boxes, which are maybe the size of a microwave oven that's been sort of stretched out a little bit. And they have holes with these rubber appendages where you stick your hands in, and danger, Will Robinson. And you can, they wouldn't let us do that part. We could only look at them and take pictures, but that's how they manipulate the rocks and shave off little pieces that they then send out to researchers all over the world. It's really, really cool place.
I can only imagine. And to live vicariously through you is pretty cool here. So, all right. So what have we learned from the moon rocks? Are there things that we might recognize today, research as a result? What has that all led to from what you can?
Well, we've learned an awful lot about how old the Earth was, how it was formed. We know that the composition of the Earth and the moon are very similar in terms of, they both have a crust, they both have a very metallic core. There are some processes on the moon that stopped, weathering processes, earthquakes and things like that. So the moon is like a record of history. The youngest moon rocks are as old as the oldest rocks on Earth, I think is how to say it. In other words, the moon is static. Earth keeps going through these regenerative processes that come from earthquakes that push rocks up and out, and lava and that kind of thing. So it's still a generative process. That's not happening on the moon. And they also use what they've learned from the moon rocks to sort of gauge their understanding of other planets they encounter in the solar system. We know there's pretty much no evidence of life on the moon. They've looked at the rocks, not found any evidence of that. Whereas, on Mars, it's a different story. So we've learned a lot, and really come to understand a lot more about ourselves.
Again, just as a reminder, if you have comments or questions for Beth, put them in the chat. Teddy will keep an eye on that.
By the way, Randy, I got another piece of information that you may or may not know, and Beth may or may not know this, but the whole conversation of the moon is made of green cheese came from a dude named John Haywood and a book he wrote called The Proverbs in 1546. Now, I haven't done my research, so I'm not sure how he came up with that, but that is where that statement came from.
Sounds a little cheesy to me today.
Just a little bit, buddy. So.
A little cheesy. All right. So you mentioned earlier on the space station. And I've heard that. I've heard of it. I don't know how long it's been in existence. I don't know how do people survive up there? And just let's talk through that. First off, how did that thing get started? This whole space station. And also you mentioned that astronaut that's been up there for a long time. We'll cover that here in a minute, but you know about how long the space station's been up there? Ballpark.
Well, the one that's up there right now has been up there since 2000, so 22 years.
So
we
okay.
had one before. It was called
Yeah.
Skylab, right?
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah, it wasn't continually staffed. They had 2-3 missions. And then that thing orbited and eventually fell back to Earth. But they wanted a platform in space where they could do experiments that would help them understand how people can survive long duration in space. Space shuttle wasn't quite enough to do that. It couldn't stay up more than a few weeks at a time. So they decided to build a space station. It is an international partnership. There's 5 agencies, 15 countries represented: United States, Russia, Europe, Canada, Japan. It orbits 230 miles up, goes about 5 miles a second, which is how fast pretty much anything in space flies. That's the distance to the moon and back every day, roughly.
Wow.
The path for the space station takes it over 90% of Earth's population. It is huge, larger than a 6-bedroom house. Sleeps 6. There's 2 bathrooms. It has a
full
gym.
baths, or is one of them a powder room?
I think they're full.
Okay.
They're full. It has a gym. Every astronaut who goes up there has to work out a couple of hours a day to mitigate the loss of bone and muscle mass in microgravity. Has a bay window that looks down on Earth with a circular 360-degree view. The guy who was up there, I've never had the privilege of meeting him. His name is Frank Rubio. He's a medical doctor, a lieutenant colonel in the Army, been an astronaut since 2017. He launched in September of last year. His record was 371 days, I want to say.
370 according to Wikipedia, but it could be rounded up, rounded down.
Over a year he was there. He wasn't supposed to be there that long, but
they forgot
there
he was
was
up there.
a little bit of a problem with the Soyuz
Your wife is
capsule
on
that
the
he went
phone.
up in.
Your wife is on the phone. Tell her
Bring
I'm
milk
not
and
here.
bread.
Tell him I'm not here. Wow. So he's been up there a year. It had been up there a year.
Well, he's back now, but
yeah,
he'd been up there over a year.
Wow. All right. So here's a few just random, I guess, thoughts or questions. First off, why should we care? Being no gravity. I mean, I'm on the ground. I'm dealing with gravity. How does understanding gravity or the lack of it affects on the body? How does that impact my life? Why should I care?
Well,
what's going on?
Well, you should care because we can see in the lack of gravity and microgravity and weightlessness how the body behaves. And one of the things that happens is everything is weightless. So all the fluids in your body, when you're in space, they kind of float to your head and you get this puffy face and really skinny legs, and the fluid coming up into your head begins to affect the way you see, the way you hear, the way you balance, right? It's balance is not an issue when you're in microgravity as much, but when you come back to Earth, you're wobbly. Some people, it takes them days, maybe a week or more to recover, right? And they'll forget that they're in gravity and they'll drop things, or they'll they'll just not be able to get their footing, kind of like, getting your sea legs back after you've been on a boat for quite a while.
Mhm.
And so these are the kinds of things where they can look at astronauts whose bodies behave this way, and they can compare them to the physiology of people with disabilities, with Alzheimer's, aging issues, all kinds of things that you need your vestibular system and that sort of thing for, and they can develop treatments for that kind of thing.
Hey, Beth, hang
For
tight.
you.
Randy, Beth, hang tight for a minute. It's the
Yep.
bottom of the hour. It's time to make money. As I do the, hey, you're on Lunch Conversations with Randy and Teddy. Our special guest today is Beth Dickey, and she is, in fact, on the East Coast of the United States. She is not floating around
In space.
in a space machine out there in the middle of nowhere. Lunch Conversations with Randy and Teddy is every Wednesday, 11:55 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Our purpose is to bring you great conversations and really cool ideas and stories, and Beth is a part of that journey. So Beth, Randy, back to you,
Yeah.
buddy.
All right, so the space station is floating around up there, what, hundreds of miles above or whatever,
230.
230 miles above.
Roughly.
And
Pay attention,
so
Randy.
230. So I get a hankering for a Domino's pizza. They ain't delivering up there, are they? So what kind of food did these dudes eat? I mean,
Well,
come on.
they're not delivering today,
Not today.
but with the opening of commercial markets in space, that the space station and other things that NASA's been doing has begun to start. One day, who knows, right? But they can eat. They've got refrigerators and freezers up there. Not everything they eat is perishable or fun, like ice cream, but there's a place for that. They don't eat stuff that's squirted out of a tube anymore. Generally, it is rehydratable stuff. It's good food that you and I would eat. I've tasted it. It's really not bad. But they cook it here, they dry it out, take it up there. There's a machine that will dispense water into a packet, right? And you'll see in the grocery store, right? This technology has come back to prepared foods. A lot of prepared foods you'll see in the grocery store, but they'll rehydrate it and they'll massage it a little bit, and they'll cut a slit in it, and they have a spoon, and they'll just, eat out of a packet of something. Their drinks are that way as well. But they do have some perishable things that you'll see all of these cargo missions going back and forth to the space station, right? And on those cargo missions, a lot of times they will have special treats for the astronauts. Somebody's got a hankering for a candy bar, maybe they'll find that on there. Or, they want some popcorn, maybe they'll find that. The thing is, they have to be careful about getting anything that's too crummy. Oh, jeez.
What do they think of next, right?
Well, it could be. I mean, there may be a day when they're able to make pizza on the space station. They won't have to order from Domino's. But the other thing they do too is they do grow some things of their own. Lettuce, tomatoes, that kind of thing. It's not just to feed the astronauts, but it's agricultural research into hydroponics and aeroponics and different ways to make growing plants on Earth more productive, and to figure out if we can take seeds with us to another planet, right? And sustain ourselves there. You remember the Matt Damon, what was the name of the movie? He grew the potatoes on Mars.
Yeah.
The Martian.
Yes, The Martian. The Martian.
Greg Jones is our behind the scenes statistician.
Yeah. So all this stuff, it has a purpose. It's a purpose versus just a vacation. I gotta ask you a question too. Okay, I know you're not in the space station now, that's behind you, but if you were, would you have to wear certain garb in there? again, based on weightlessness, I don't know. Is there, or they just walk around like you and me, just regular clothes?
Well,
and do their
you
thing?
don't walk around, you float around. The
Float
only
around.
time you're going to be walking around is when you are tethered to a treadmill.
Mhm.
That's its resistance exercise, because weights are useless in weightlessness, but generally it's just street clothes. You may have your clothes coordinated so you look like a team when you do a TV interview, your shirts are all the same or something like that. But it's street clothes, pants,
Or
shorts,
wearing your pajamas.
socks, wearing your pajamas, maybe,
Doing a Zoom
You,
call in
you,
your
you
sweats?
see me in a shirt here, you don't know what's going on down there.
Yeah. So Randy, are you and Beth going to go back to the moon conversation? Because I got a question about that.
Yeah, we can go there.
Yeah,
You
go
want to
ahead.
You want to go there now? Let's do that.
Well, here,
So
let me,
Whatever
I
you
read
want.
this, story, Beth, which was really freaking interesting to me. True story. There's a company that makes 3D houses. They print 3D concrete houses. This company has been commissioned, whatever appropriate word, by NASA to put together a program to build these concrete, whatever the material is, homes, buildings on the moon. My question is, if you know about this, and if so, are they going to use moon dust to make, or moon dirt? You use a much more sophisticated word, to make this concrete, or do they have to haul concrete and water up there?
I know about it because I think I saw the same story you saw. And my recollection is in the last week or 10 days or so, I saw it on 60 Minutes.
Yeah, one of the CBS shows.
Something like that, right? So no, they wouldn't haul the concrete and the water up there. The whole point of the modern space program is to make it sustainable.
Mhm.
And one thing that really kills sustainability is launching heavy stuff from Earth, right?
Doesn't
They're
work.
trying to get away from that. So it's, how do you live off the land? How do you use the resources in the place where you're going? I remember many, many years ago, I was sitting in a space conference of some sort, and I was listening to this guy talk about these robots that would be going to the moon or going somewhere and building a colony of themselves. They'd be manufacturing themselves. And I thought, that is the scariest and the weirdest idea I have ever heard of. Well, what this thing is with the 3D printing, it's I'm going to say it's exactly like what he's talking about, but it's what he was talking about, right? And so these printers would go up there, the machines. I thought it was really cool watching it. I think, wow, I want that for my next house. But they'd launch these things, and they would quarry in, I'm going to use the word regolith, the moon dirt, the pebbles, the dust, the sand. They would make cement out of that to build whatever structures it is they were going to build. It's a really cool idea.
That next step, that next great, journey in space travel, space occupation, is that you got to build apartments, or you got to build a condo, or you got to build a hotel. And, so it was interesting to me.
Well, I think that's really a leap into the future. I think we got to get back there first, and we have to learn the pioneers have to learn how to survive. Then I think we can think about the condos and the apartment buildings. But yeah, exactly.
So here's a question our buddy Don asked that we haven't touched on. Are there, besides physical issues that an astronaut has to overcome, are there any emotional or engagement, human engagement issues that an astronaut needs to work on, or needs help to work on when they 370 days in space? What kind of emotional issues have you heard about or talked about that may be relevant?
Well, it's a really good question. And the short answer is yes. Some to more degrees than others. And in terms of the detail, I'm just going to say that much.
Yeah,
You know,
I get
because
that.
I have friends who have talked to me about it, and I need to keep their confidence.
I get that, but it's like
but-
any other travel.
Well, it's, you know, it's isolation.
Yeah,
And you may be up there with 6, 7 other people, but those are the only 6, 7 people, right? And they talk about, there's a book called The Overview Effect, one of the books that might provide a little bit of, you know, understanding of what this is like. And any astronaut who has been on the space station, who's written a book, they're going to talk about this kind of thing, the feeling of isolation and how they train for it on the ground and how they get over it in space. One of the things they do on the ground is they do wilderness training, where they will go out in small groups. And I've witnessed this. I actually went to, this is back before they even launched the first piece of the space station. So pretty long time ago, late 90s. They would send small groups of astronauts to a place like Alberta, Canada, in the wilderness, in the middle of the winter, in the snow, to go camping and to learn survival skills and how to support each other in a team environment. And that spoke to not just the survival skills, but, you know, the head skills also, and the interpersonal relationships. I was lucky. I got to glamp. I didn't have to camp. But it was really interesting to watch all of that and to watch them be given a problem that they had to solve as a group and see how it worked out. Yeah. And I read as I was preparing for this, and I can't tell you all the details, but I read that there's a tool now that is used in remote counseling situations, for mental health counseling, that has some ties to applications on the space station.
I got you. All right, so let's take Randy, if you don't mind. I'm gonna get our audience's chat, because our audience is the most important person on here besides Beth, and you know that, Randy. Christy wants to know, with the increase in females working in this STEM related fields, are you seeing more women in NASA? And Christy wants to know, and I'm ad-libbing here a little bit, how does she sign up for an internship?
Well, I knew somebody was going to ask how to sign up for an internship. The first answer, Christy, is heck yeah, a lot more women. Yeah. And a lot more open attitude to women as the years have advanced. So that's all good news. NASA is really emphasizing the diversity and the inclusion angles. And so internships, Teddy, don't you have a link that you can put in the chat? And I'm gonna give me a second here. I've got some notes on the internships.
And it was at the bottom of the talking points, Teddy, that Word document.
I'll go find that. If it's on the bottom of the talking points, I'll find that and share it.
We'll cover that toward the end. If somebody wants to get involved, so that'll give you time to.
Okay, we can wait.
Get your notes. Well, I want to talk about we've got about 15 minutes left. I want to talk about Artemis, the latest iteration of Apollo or whatever. So what is Artemis going to do? And we've been to the moon already. Why go back? I mean, it's like going to Kernersville. You've been there once. Teddy, you want to go back again?
Well, actually, I do have a hankering for that, but that's
just being facetious. But again, I'm sure there's a lot going on that'll be new discovery. So help us understand the why behind why are we going back to the moon with Artemis?
Well, let's talk about just briefly about what we did first, right? It was Apollo. It was 6 landings on the moon, and they were all clustered around in general, the equator of the moon. That's all we've seen. That would be like, going to Florida and just stopping at Disney.
Gotcha.
And, right. So there's plenty more of Florida to see. There's plenty more of the Caribbean to see. So that's one reason is there's more to see. And the other reason is that we want, as a society, to venture outward, and we need a place to be a proving ground. And the moon is a place we sort of know. and where we can practice and we can learn all the things that we need to learn to be able to go to Mars and do it successfully. So there are some differences between Apollo and Artemis. The big one being that Artemis is not just going to be a series of visits and then we stop. We're going to go there and we're going to stay, or at least develop a way to access the lunar surface consistently, 24/7, 365. Not going to be just white males going. The plan is that right now, I think it's sometime in 2025, when Artemis 3 lands, the people who land and actually walk on the moon will be a woman and the first person of color. So the first woman and the first person of color to land on the moon. And the landing region that's been selected is the South Pole. And the reason for that is that the science that's been done since the time of Apollo has shown us that there's very high potential for there being water ice in the craters, frozen in the craters at the South Pole. What's water ice good for? Well, you melt it and you drink it.
And you make
resource number
concrete.
one, right?
Teddy puts a plug in for ice cream. That's good.
No. You make concrete.
Oh, I thought he said ice cream.
Focus on the big stuff, dude.
Focus, dude. And yeah, I mean, that's one thing you could do. The other important thing you could do is if you have water, you can split it into hydrogen and oxygen. And hydrogen and oxygen separate are rocket fuel. So you remember what I said a little bit earlier about the whole point of sustainable exploration is not to spend so much money launching it from Earth. It's to figure out how to do it in space, where the lack or the minimized gravity or the lack of gravity means that you don't need as much thrust. Therefore, you don't need to spend as much on fuel and the equipment and that kind of thing. You know, it's heavy, right? So you make rocket fuel on the moon and you can launch a spacecraft from lunar orbit out theoretically at more economically. I'm not going to say at less cost because everything costs more always, but more economically, more cost efficient. Wow.
So lots of stuff going on coming up. So what's the timeline for Artemis landing on the moon at this point? Best you know.
Well, right now they're saying 2025. There's
right
a lot of stuff.
That's like next week in the speed of life going by us right now.
Well, but there's Teddy, there's a lot that has to happen before that. All right. We've already gotten one Artemis mission off the ground, and that was an uncrewed test flight of the Orion capsule and the Space Launch System, which is today's version of the Saturn V rocket.
Yeah.
That happened about a year ago. Later, about a year from now, will be Artemis 2. And that, you could think of that as it's analogous to the Apollo missions that went in Earth orbit and then it went in orbit around the moon, but didn't land. They just went out to look around and make sure everything worked, right? But it'll have a crew, 4 people. And one thing that may interest you is that there is a North Carolinian on that crew.
On Artemis, Artemis 2.
Artemis 2, yeah. Her name is Christina Hammett Cook. She was raised in Jacksonville. She's an alumna of North Carolina State University. She holds the record for a longest single space flight by a woman, which is 328 days. She's been an astronaut since 2013. She spent 3 expeditions on the space station, participated in the first all-female spacewalk out of the station, and she was assigned to Artemis in April. So she's been about
this is Christina
now. Isn't that exciting?
Is this Christina
Christina Hammett Cook. K-O-C.
I found her. I'm looking for her to see if she's a Facebook friend.
Teddy knows the world. Hey, we've got 10 minutes left. I'd be remiss because I've been after Beth about this topic over the last few weeks as we've had some discussions. All right, so I get it. You guys go to the moon, you do all this stuff. That's all cool, and I get it and all that. But you know what? If I want to reach for a pen, what is going on with research and the results of research? I remember as a kid, Tang came as a result of the space program. I'm thinking, great, you know, if you like Tang, knock yourself out. But what are some other things, some cool stuff that we may use every day that came about as a result of efforts from NASA?
Well, I hate to disappoint you, but you don't remember
Yeah,
well,
it was
because
backwards, Randy.
What?
not Tang,
Tang
not
went
Tang,
on a space flight, but it
Not-
wasn't created there.
not Velcro,
Not Velcro.
not
My
Teflon,
childhood is ruined. What the
not
heck?
space pens.
No space pens right upside down and all that stuff?
No. NASA used them, didn't invent them.
Oh, man, Teddy, the things we learn on the show.
However, NASA did have something to do with your cordless drill.
Okay.
All right. So when the astronauts went to the moon, they needed battery powered tools.
Yeah.
That's how you got a cordless drill. It's because they had to figure out how to put the power they needed into a battery pack that would hook onto a drill, right? Another one is your cell phone. The miniaturization that was necessary to carry out an Apollo mission.
Okay.
Right. And oh my God, you have a flip phone. I can't believe
It
but that ended up, it led to what's in your
Yeah.
cell phone today, which by the way, I understand, and I don't know where to source this, but the common wisdom is that there's more computing power in your cell phone today than was needed to launch the Apollo
In this one
mission.
or this one, Beth? This one or this one?
I think either one.
Either one, maybe.
If you had the right program, you could have launched Apollo on your cell phone.
Be careful, Teddy. You have the power. What are some other cool things? Would you mention something about dealing with laundry
Okay, all right. So,
This is going to be interesting.
There's a bunch here. There's a bunch. Let me just run through some real quick.
Go for it.
NASA is in your Febreze Unstoppables, in your fabric spray, because Procter and Gamble did an experiment with colloids on the space station. And colloids are little tiny particles that get suspended in liquid. Space station air filtration technology has ended up in grocery stores to keep your fruits and vegetables fresh, in wine cellars, in your air purifiers that were designed to eliminate the COVID virus. There's a bacterium that was so resilient that it outlived NASA's efforts to sanitize a spacecraft that was going to Mars, and it's now being used in a skincare ingredient that boosts SPF in sunscreen.
Okay.
There's some interns at NASA developed an odor eliminating shoe insert based on some carbon cloth that was being used for purification in space.
Hook me up with a monthly subscription to that one.
Yeah, the world would appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, and so there's a lot of stuff we've already hinted at that has ended up in your medical care. The Hubble Space Telescope is responsible for a way to, what are they called? Charge couple devices on the Hubble Space Telescope are responsible for development of a new way to get a breast cancer biopsy. A new and better way to do that. Lots of examples in cancer research, which is, close to my heart, and I think yours too. I've got a family member who's got cancer, but improvements in CT scans and ways to treat cancer. One specifically with the drug Keytruda being investigated. Just an awful lot of things. One that you can test for yourself, and it's not medicine, it's not consumer goods, but if you go, I can't give you the URL. It's too long, it's too complicated, but you can just Google, what did Hubble see on my birthday? And it'll take you to a website where you can get a picture of what the Hubble Space Telescope was observing on the day you were born. So there are all kinds of tangible benefits that you can enjoy if you think about the space program. NASA, we say NASA is with you when you fly. Every commercial aircraft, every air traffic control tower in the United States has NASA technology on it because of aeronautics research.
Wow. A whole lot going on. Beth Dickey, thanks for joining us. You're a program manager, or I guess semi-retired at this point for NASA. See, semi-retired, is that a fair way to put it? Sort of?
Well, it's the only way I know to describe it.
Yeah, what I described as not quite certain what to do next. So
yeah. Hey, we've got just a few minutes left. I wanted to ask you for a takeaway. If there's something you wanted folks to remember, what is it briefly?
Well, I think, I want you to remember that you can get off track in your career. We tend to live and breathe and eat what we do. And what I've noticed over the years is that the people who have been the most successful at NASA, and by the way, we didn't talk about those internships yet, but the people who've been the most successful at NASA are multidimensional. Every one of these astronauts they're not just rocket scientists. They are musicians, they are poets, they are actors, they're singers, you name it. They're just multidimensional people, and they have used that to their benefit in their careers. And it's something that we can all do. If we remember that we have a plan for ourselves, but a plan is a plan, it's not in stone. And a plan is really what we have to make sure that we are agile and able to change when we need to seize whatever opportunity that comes in front of us. I think that's what NASA's done. It's been a learning institution. The people who work for it have that mentality. And whether you go to work for NASA or anywhere else, it's a good way to be. And let me just point out the internships, since that's a question, and it's a very important one. If you, I think Teddy will post the link, but there are four different ways that you can look into internships at NASA. You can be a high school student or a college student and get a paid internship, a stipend and class credit. There's also a co-op arrangement called Pathways, where if you're lucky enough to get into that, you're actually on the path to getting a job at NASA. And I want to point out, not all the jobs at NASA are astronauts and technicians and rocket scientists. There's a variety of work at NASA, just like there is in any private company, from the janitor and the secretary on up to the boss. You just have to open your eyes and your ears and look. USA Jobs is where NASA jobs are posted.
Yeah. And by the way, Randy, you have to have a GPA of 2.9 or better. I think that might almost exclude you and me, but that's okay.
But if you add up all 4 years, and I got out in 4 years, so I'm proud to say. But if you add them all up, I achieved at least a 4.0. Just to have, Beth Dickey, thank you for joining us. We're right out of time right now.
Great to meet you. Thank you very much for sharing.
I'd like to have you back again.
I've had a good time. Thank you guys for
and by the way,
keeping me on the ledge.
Christy and Don both said they absolutely loved having you here, and appreciate your time. And and Don even said, come back. So
because there's a lot more we could talk about. So good deal.
Hey, we only got through about this much of my notes.
I know it. All right. So next week we've got some cool stuff we're going to cover. We've got a husband and wife, Mariah and Byron Edgington. We're going to get into the brain, Teddy. So
do I need to be there?
Yeah, you need to be there to help us with this. But talk about neurodiversity. We're also going to talk about the mindset, our mindset, and how that controls our lives and can help us lead ourselves to success. And so again, a lot of stuff dealing with the brain and how it operates and how we have control over our thoughts and how we can use that to our benefit. So we'll do that next week. That'll be our show for October 25th, Teddy. And I think we're out of time.
Yeah,
What
we
you got?
did
Anything
good.
else?
Again, Beth, great to see you. Let's stay in touch because as Randy said, I think there's another conversation coming.
Mhm.
Again, to our audience, I love you guys, love you showing up. To everybody who's watched this on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, or our podcast, thank you very much for showing up. If you have a topic you want us to bring to the show, you got to hunt down Randy or Teddy. Everybody take care. Bye.
Have a good one. See you now. Thanks, Beth.